Just wait for the last few to take their seats. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Conservative Home event in partnership with YMCA on building Young Britannia, how Conservative principles and levelling up can win young voters. Thank you to all of you who are joining us in the room this evening, and hello to everyone watching at home and through the app. If you are viewing through the conference app today, you can send questions through to us here via Slido, and we'll make sure we put those to the panel later on in the session. The question of how to appeal to young voters has long been a challenging one for the Conservative Party. The crossover point, which is the age at which someone is more likely to vote Conservative than Labour, has oscillated between sort of mid-30s and sort of high 40s at various points. And the importance of appealing to young voters is highlighted by the fact that the Conservative Party is much more likely to win when that crossover point is lower. So in 2017, it was 47 was the age they're more likely to vote Conservative. In 2019, that fell to 39. So you can see the importance for the party of engaging with those young voters. The party's relationship with young people is at times a little strained. In recent years, conversations around high tuition fees, increasing taxes, rising house prices. But at the core of this, Conservatives and young people should be more aligned with each other than they are. Young people, they want to buy their first home, they want to start their own businesses, they want to get on in life and achieve their dreams. They are aspirational, optimistic and positive about their future, which are all values that the Chancellor mentioned in his speech yesterday. So the question we're exploring today is how can those Conservative principles, those policies and levelling up, everyone's favourite phrase, how that agenda can be used both in government and by third sector organisations like YMCA to help young people and to give them the support that they need, the skills and the opportunities they need to thrive. To lead us in that discussion, I am delighted to be joined this evening by Gideon MP, Dehenna Davison MP, Ben Everitt MP, Jason Stacey not MP yet, and Alex Taylor as well, who's a YMCA Youth Ambassador. For those of you who don't know me, and I don't expect you to, also not an MP, my name's Angus Wyatt and I'm the Commercial Director here at Conservative Home. So I'm conscious you're not here to hear from me, you are here to hear from our lovely panel this evening. And I'd like Jason to kick us off with just the work that YMCA are doing in this space and how you're supporting young people, and then we can get some of the political view as well.
Thank you for that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Stacey. I'm the Director of Policy at YMCA England and Wales. And I know when I say YMCA, people can't help kind of doing that. But we've done some research in kind of preparation for this meeting, and kind of one of the things that struck me from it was around perception is often much more potent than reality. And actually in the political world, once a perception is formed, it can take a generation before you can change it, regardless of what's actually happening in the real world. So it's kind of that kind of what is the perception of a typical Conservative voter? If you went out in the street in Manchester, probably would say they're older, they're professional types, you know, high educational achievers in a good paying job, own their own home, got money. But actually in reality, that's not enough. In terms of Conservative success at 2019 election and all through the 80s, it needed people from what the economists call the C1s, the C2s. And when the Conservatives lose that vote, that's when they lose power. Yes, the South might be important, but equally the Midlands, the North West, the South West, Yorkshire and Humber, and of course the North East have a whole swathe of marginal seats which the Conservatives need to win. And if they don't win, they don't have a majority. But the one thing that is absolutely clear throughout this is age is a differentiating factor. And I think, as you just said, in 2019 at the general election, 39 was the age where more people at that age start voting Conservative than Labour. In 2017, that was 47. That's never gone below 35, even under Mrs. Thatcher. I think in 1983, the lowest it has gone is 35. So for decades, effectively, the Conservatives have always had a challenge in terms of how it attracts some of the younger voters. And those perceptions of the Conservatives came through very much. We did some research with 1,045 young people aged 16 to 24, most of those already 18 and above, and we did a few who would become part of the electoral register during this Parliament. The three most negative phrases associated with the party are they only care about certain parts of the country. That was the most popular negative. Supports the most well-off in society, and does not invest enough in public services. They are the three most commonly retorted negative impressions of the Conservative Party. But also put in the context that even the top one of that, 32% said. But when you talk about general trust in politics among young people, 54% said they have not voted because they do not know enough about politics, or they don't trust any politician to deliver what they say. So actually, regardless of negative impressions of parties, the biggest hurdle political parties have got is to overcome is around this level of trust in politics as a whole. And actually, I've been, in my professional life, I've done many focus groups, surveys, opinion polls, etc. with young people. And the thing that's actually always surprised me is actually just how conservative in attitude many young people are. Now, that doesn't translate necessarily to political support, but certainly in their attitude. And I've got a number of examples I could give, but one that actually always stayed with me was around when the government wanted to bring in sanctions on benefits for those who would not attend interviews or didn't go to Job Centre Plus. And in all the work that we did, the focus groups we did with young people, although they had very strong views about Job Centre Plus, 2/3 of young people supported the concept of sanctioning benefits because they felt it was right for people who were playing the system to in some way face some sort of sanction. So there is that kind of conservative attitude there. So what do we do? I suppose there's two paths. You can continue along the current path, which is just make the assumption that at some point in the 30s they will switch. And they will go from being Labour or Liberal supporting or Green supporting to becoming Conservative. Or we actually start understanding what motivates young people. What is it that they are saying? Firstly, it opens up about 10 million more people between 18 to 29 who potentially we can speak to. It broadens the actual base for the party. And actually at a time when only 25% of young people who we surveyed said that they are committed to a particular political party, which suggests to you that there is a lot of young people out there that actually with the right messaging, the right communications, the right understanding about what we do, could be attracted to a political party. So what might this look like? Firstly, strong positive tone around the role and place of young people in our communities. Young people on the whole don't want handouts, they want opportunities to thrive. And some may need a bit of a leg up, but haven't we all needed it at some point in our lives? But actually give them the opportunities and they will take them. And it's recognising that the future of this country actually, as much as anyone else, lies with the young people in terms of them being skilled up and then being motivated, their entrepreneurial skill in terms of delivering in this kind of like post-Brexit world, the success of the country. And it's interesting, I'll leave you the final points. The four most important issues that came out for young people, their aspiration is to be financially secure with savings, to have a well-paid job that they enjoy, to own their own home, to be healthy and well. So in other words, financial security, working in a secure job, home ownership, good health. I don't think those aspirations differ from any of us in this room. And so if you think about, my colleague Alex been handing this out in terms of this is how we try to frame what levelling up in Britain for young people will be, because it's meeting the aspirations that young people themselves say they want out of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And I think it would be great to hear from Alex as well, who's one of YMCA's youth ambassadors, just in terms of how you're involved in YMCA's work and what you're doing.
Cool. So hi, I'm Alex Taylor. I'm a youth ambassador for YMCA England and Wales. I'm from Barnsley.
South Yorkshire representative.
Which is in the Yorkshire and Humber, not the North East. I'm a trustee at my local YMCA, but I'm a youth worker by trade, so to speak, and I work in voice, participation and co-production. That's my day role. I can talk more about why I'm saying what I do, but a lot of my prepped stuff is a little bit before kind of the age that Jason just spoke about. So for me, I think it's not, young people don't decide who to vote when they turn 18. It's a process that you go through throughout your life. Before you turn 18, it sets you in the mood, on the level of where you're going to go. And in my experience, young people are passionate and interested about the communities that they live in. They just don't always know how to channel that passion. I don't often come across a young person who doesn't have a dream of some kind. They've got an aspiration, they know what they want to be. But what they often lack is the modelling and belief that could actually become a reality. So it's that they know what they want to be, but they're never going to get there. That's what they struggle with. I was lucky. I was a young person that grew up on the back end of investment in young people. And unfortunately, I don't think it's a secret that youth services have been decimated over the last 10 years. To the point where recently I was doing some work with some young people to support them to feed into the DCMS, the youth review, all that kind of stuff. And a large chunk of the conversations that those young people were having were, what is a youth club? No concept. And these are young people that are engaged in society, 11 to 18-year-olds who have never experienced universal services, that many of us in this room, I would have thought, at some point in our lives will have experienced, be that, like myself, at my local youth club, detached youth work provision, or in boys and girls clubs and historical youth work that happened at grassroots level. That's a whole generation that have not had priceless growth that comes from the informal education that's achieved through youth services, and youth services that are open to all. So not just those who have reached a crisis point, needed to tick someone's box or to meet a threshold for targeted services. I'll come off my the power of youth work soapbox and bring it back to the question. But how can investing in youth services win voters? Because I honestly think that is one of the big answers. And my understanding is that people vote for the party or the people who they think do or did things for them, the party that resonates with them. And there has to be trust. Young people need to trust the party that they're going to vote for. They need to know that the people that they're going to vote for are interested in them. And for me, the way to build that trust is by following through on promises that have been made. So it's not just saying you're going to do something, it's making it happen. A manifesto promise is brilliant, but if it never appears, that's not a good foundation for trust. And supporting the services that enable our young people to develop all the skills that they need to become well-rounded adults who are active members of society is the best way to make that happen.
Great, thank you very much, Alex. It's really great to hear your story firsthand as well. So, Joe, perhaps if I can turn to you of our three MPs first, just for your view and kind of, the work that you're doing with young people. And I know you kind of previously, before you became an MP, done a lot of work with kind of charity organisations and young people as well in the third sector. So it'd be great to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. And it's brilliant to be here, and it's fantastic to see so many young faces. I have to say, if you take me out of the equation, probably if we added up the ages of everybody in the room, and they're all going to vote Conservative, and this was replicated across the country, then we'd have an even bigger majority next time around. So, I mean, it's been brilliant to see the level of enthusiasm in conference and to see people expressing their ideas about the future of this country. And it's particularly inspiring because, as has been said, traditionally, conservatism is associated as something that you acquire as you get older, which is a real shame, because I do truly believe that it's the best choice for young people. And I think we need to make sure that we can communicate that it offers the best start in life. For me, it starts with listening, because I know that the young want their voices to be heard. Youth empowerment is absolutely critical, and for me it's become a core focus of my role as chair of the all-party parliamentary group on youth affairs, how we can get those young voices heard, and a cross-section of young voices I think it's brilliant that we've got youth ambassadors, and I think we need to roll it out more widely to other youth organisations, and to have a real cross section in every community, because there is so much we need to listen to. I think that politicians in Westminster have to make decisions, but they have to listen to the voices of those people that are in different parts of the country, that have different challenges. And we all know that levelling up is very much about handing back power to local communities, so that young people in every community have an active role in the local area. And I do think that by listening, we're obviously going to understand better the concerns of young people. Your generation has to bear the brunt of climate change, changing workforce, a pandemic, and all the structural economic changes such as rising house prices. And these are very real issues. And we've heard an awful lot about mental health challenges during the pandemic. I think that in order to tackle that, we're going to have a kind of root and branch analysis of the impact that it's had on young people, and the solutions have to be worked out by young people. So, I think Conservatives, have to appeal to aspiration, as we said. I'm always struck by the ambition and the determination of young people. I have to say it was a particular sorrow to me last week to find Sir Keir Starmer turning up at my local sixth form college and making a promotional video for Labour conference, where he highlighted the fact that, if you ask somebody a question, I'm going to try it out on you, do you think that you'd have to move away from your hometown in order to achieve your ambition? How many people would say yes? You probably think that if you lived in a post-industrial town where opportunities historically had not been great, that you might have to move away. So they all put their hands up. And this was used as a kind of an example of how the Conservative government had failed, which is quite rich after decades of Labour not looking after the now blue wall seats. And he also made the point that women were not safe in the town centre. So he painted this negative picture of a community where young people have to leave, there are no jobs, women can't walk safely in the streets. And I think that correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the young want hope, want aspiration, want a vision for the future that genuinely says, we're tackling the big problems. We're working on things like climate change. We understand as a government and Conservatives, and I think that is what surely must be the core values that is reflected in the young people. And you mentioned my background, so I've run social enterprises, I've worked with community groups. I've never seen a lack of aspiration anywhere in the country, and I've never seen it in any generation, a belief in the future and a belief that you can do better. And I think that if we, as a government, with our sort of levelling up agenda, can give everybody the sense of that your future is in your own hands, and as a government we will empower you to take that future and take it in the direction you want. And I think, obviously, you mentioned the public sector. We've invested massively during the pandemic in the public sector, but there's also a really big role for the private sector, for enterprise. So I'm passionate about young enterprise, youth enterprise. I'd like to see a kickstart enterprise to help young people who want to start up their own businesses, to have the same sort of funding that Kickstart gives to young people going into employment. There are a whole number of things that we can do, and investment in youth skills and education so that young people are ready for the challenges of the future. Stoke-on-Trent, where I represent, we have the largest gaming community in the country, I think. Staffordshire University is well known for it. So, we're moving towards a vision for the future that isn't just based on manufacturing, it's digital technology, it's a future vision that means our young people can stay where they are. There are job opportunities. If, as the young man who was a young Labour activist who had been planted in the audience of this particular video said he wants a job in manufacturing. He can find that too, but I suspect, because his father wasn't a tool maker, he probably wasn't really looking for a job in manufacturing. But it's about under a Conservative government, we just want to create those new opportunities, and we want to make it that you can stay where you want to live. You will be empowered and inspired to live the life you want to live, and we'll do our best to help you.
Thank you very much, Joe. And Dehenna, I know you are one of, if not the youngest Conservative MP.
I'm the third youngest.
Third youngest.
Which is amazing. I mean, I got elected at 26 and there were people younger than me. It's great.
Which is fantastic. But and I should say, by the way, unfortunately, Dehenna does have to leave us slightly early today. But,
yeah, I'm going to be going at 6, but hopefully I'll still get to answer some of your questions.
We'll go through some questions to make sure we get to that. But it'd be great to hear from you in terms of, as Joe said, getting young people's voices into politics as well, and making sure those voices are heard. A little bit of kind of your journey and what your perspective is on this.
Completely. Well, thank you so much, Angus. And I think I'm going to start by just going back to something that Jason said. You spoke about what people's perception of a kind of typical Tory voter is. I think that's changing a little bit based on what we saw in the last general election. But if you kind of park that, what do you think people's perception of a typical Tory MP is? Because I'm guessing it's not this. And I think, quite right. And I think that's one of the most incredible things about this last election. Taking aside the fact we won a really great victory, is some of the actual people that got elected. We had one of the youngest intakes of Conservative MPs that we've ever had. We had, I think, 10 under 30s, which is really remarkable, really getting those younger voices into Parliament to be able to share the experiences of their generation. And I say this, at 28 now, I feel ancient compared to some of the young people I talk to in my constituency. I am rubbish on TikTok. All I do is cause scandals and get myself into trouble. I'm definitely not down with the kids in the way that I used to feel when I was a young Conservative, certainly. And that's why getting young people's voices is so important. It's why engaging with groups like the YMCA is so important. But let's talk about values, because I think when people are deciding who they vote for, there are very few people who vote purely based on kind of a really rational interpretation of a manifesto. They vote based on which party they feel really embodies their values. And, if a tough time comes down the line, which party is really going to speak to my values and get us through that difficult time? And to me, that party is the Conservative Party, because I certainly wasn't brought up in a Conservative household. I wasn't brought up in a political household at all. When I discovered politics and started to learn a little bit about it, I thought about the values that I'd been brought up with. And for me, it was basically that if you want to get on in life, you need to pick yourself up, work really hard, have that, real drive to succeed, and aspire. Want to do better, grasp any opportunity that comes your way. And I really don't think that I'm unusual in that. Certainly, I think that's an attitude that is shared by young people right across our country. For me, at the time when I was looking at the different political parties, the one that spoke that was the Conservatives. And that's why I joined, and that's why I'm here today. But clearly, a lot of young people don't share that interpretation. They don't see the Conservative Party as being the one for them, as we can see in the voting figures, as we can see in the kind of youth membership, and certainly as we can see on social media, where, if you were to dive on social media, you'd assume that Labour would be winning all 650 seats right across the UK, which is certainly not the case. So I think it's really down to us to really try and sell those values and to translate them into actual policies that are really going to help improve the lives of young people and really make young people feel like they have a proper stake in society as well. Because what is it that most young people that you guys speak to, and most young people in the room here, what is it you want from your life? And it goes back here to what Jason was saying. A lot of young people just want to know that they can get a good education, go on to get a good job, buy themselves a house, and live a comfortable lifestyle. And hopefully, if they decide to have kids down the line, leave a better future for their children if they decide to have them. If that's something that all our young people believe in, and that's something that the Conservative Party believe in, then we really need to gel the two together. So let's talk a little bit about policy. Now, I think the Conservative Party is doing some incredible things for young people. You think about Help to Buy, for example, helping young people to save up for a deposit and get on the housing ladder in a way that we've never really done before. You think about the skills agenda and helping young people get the skills they really need to get on in life, because for too long, and shake your head if you disagree with me, but I think for too long there has been a kind of overemphasis on the only way to get on is if you go to university. But that's totally not true, as we've seen from some of the incredible people who go on to do apprenticeships, degree apprenticeships. we've realised that that sort of 50% university target is not the way to help people get on in life. It's about looking at them, their skills, what it is they want to get from their education and where it is they want to go afterwards. And that's why we've introduced things like university technical colleges, which have been rolled out. We've got one in Sedgefield, not far around the corner from me, which is kind of marrying up businesses with education so that young people can get those skills, make those business links, and have a better chance of getting a job. We've got things like T-levels, which are a way to get that more technical education and go into things that are a bit more tech savvy, because as we know, the future is digital in so many ways, and so we need to make sure our young people are properly equipped for it. So I think we're doing some really great things. The problem we have is in selling it. And at the moment, I'm not sure that I have the answer to how we do that. So when we get to the kind of Q&A bit, if we have chance, I'd love to hear from you on how best you think we can. I think part of it comes down to role models. I think part of it comes down to listening to some of the great young voices we have. And I'm looking at one over there, Luke Allen Holmes. He's there in a grey check suit. He's fantastic. He got elected as a Conservative councillor at the age of 18. He was selected when he was just 17, and he smashed it in a seat we never expected we would win through his sheer hard work. Can we just give him a round of applause, because I'm so proud of him. Luke is so involved in his community. He's really engaged, plugged into so many of the young people around his community. We need to be taking the voices of people like Luke and really blowing them up onto the national stage to show that the Conservative Party is not just a place for, grey old men. It is a place for everyone, including young people. So I think role models are really, really important. But honestly, give us your ideas, because we want to hear from you. We want to know how best you think we should be selling these policies, because I think we have got a great message to sell for young people. We're just not quite getting the packaging right at the moment.
Dehenna, thanks very much. And Ben, I think you probably come to this with maybe sort of quite an interesting perspective. That you represent an urban community in Milton Keynes, but I know you've got a background in sort of coming from a sort of farm life and rural communities, and those two different spaces offer very different opportunities for young people. So it'd be great to hear a bit more about your view on that as well.
Thank you. It's and indeed Milton Keynes itself sort of has a foot in both of those camps as well. So my constituency, Milton Keynes North, is actually sort of 2/3 rural. And we've got the really busy city centre where robots deliver your groceries, and you can drive an electric car with charging points all over the place and ride around on an e-scooter and all this kind of stuff. But also we've got traditional market towns and villages and genuinely beautiful countryside. So the picture you're painting is that there's some kind of disparity in the opportunity there. And I think that broadly illustrates the point that when people talk about the Red Wall as a phenomenon, they make the mistake of viewing it through a geographical lens, whereas actually I think it's more of a cultural phenomenon. It was about that lack of opportunity that people felt in Red Wall seats. And I would add that in my constituency in Milton Keynes North, you had some Red Wall effects as well. Put simply, the people that voted for my predecessor did not vote for me. Different people voted for me for different reasons because of those things that drive the Red Wall characteristics. And we need to recognise that that's a whole of the nation problem, or a whole of the nation opportunity when it comes to levelling up. When it comes to engaging with a new generation, younger people, and getting people involved in politics, I think political parties in any country, in any decade, have been utterly obsessed with trying to find a magic bullet to somehow unlock this core section of the voters. And you see it not just with youth, we try, how do we engage with this community? How do we engage with that community? And how do we veer from left to right, to up and down, and try to paint themselves as something that, frankly, they are not. It comes down to, as Jason put it, trust. And I think, as Alex alluded to, it's about being genuine and, frankly, doing what you say you're going to do. Don't tell, show. And so when governments start wearing their values, our true conservative values about the availability of opportunity, about if you work hard, you will be rewarded. Those conservative values, when they start to come through in what we do, the economies that we support, the communities that we help to grow, then that is when we are going to start engaging with the generation, because the younger generation, because ultimately they just want us to be genuine. That is the trick in politics. It's be yourself, and if your policies and if your values connect with people, then you'll get elected. One of the things that's been really interesting to me is that in this fine report here, all of these 6 key building blocks to rebuilding Britannia for the new generation do come under levelling up. So we've got skills, we've got community safety, we've got home ownership, we've got the access to services, be they mental health or indeed the long-term funding for youth services, and then community cohesion in terms of giving people a voice in their community. That's levelling up. That's what we mean. It's about getting people involved in their communities and giving them those opportunities. So I'm really positive, really optimistic about the challenge, dealing with the challenges that we have, defining what levelling up is and what it means to people, and in so doing, engaging with an entirely new generation of voters.
Sure. Thanks very much, Ben. And I think little round of applause.
Like 2 claps.
That's fine. That's fine. So I think it's really clear from everything that all of you have said there that it's very much about opportunity. It's very much about being genuine, as you said, Alex. It's very much about sticking to your word when you make promises to people. And I think there's 2 elements that I think we want to cover through some of the questions that we've kind of pre-prepared and some we'll take in the room. But both in terms of what we offer for young people generally and what is morally right that we should be doing for young people across the country. And then there's a sort of political angle of, in terms of benefiting the Conservative Party and ensuring that they can stay in power and get elected, is what is their offer and what should they be doing. And I think I'm going to sort of take the second part first and maybe go to Dehenna first on this one. But in a very short summary, what do you think the Conservative Party's offer is to voters under the age of 35? How do we get that kind of crossover age to be even lower and maybe even beat Mrs T's kind of 35 age bracket?
That's the dream. I think it's some of the things that I've already highlighted. I mean, you look at what it is that we're trying to achieve with the levelling up agenda, and people say it's wishy-washy, they don't understand it. It's actually really simple. It's effectively trying to ensure that a kid growing up in a rough part of town, in a rough end of the country, has the same opportunities to get on as a kid growing up in Surrey. That's effectively what this is about. And the way that we do that is through policy. We do it through education policy, we do it through social policy, we do it through, policing, whatever it might be. And I think some of the things we're doing are so positive, and I've spoken about it already. The skills agenda. Things like T-levels, university technical colleges, apprenticeships. We have seen a rise in apprenticeships and in degree apprenticeships, helping young people to really get the skills that they need to get on in life, to forge a career for themselves, to have a real stake in society where they know that if they work hard enough, they're able to, really save up and, make a living and buy a house. And on the house buying, I go back to Help to Buy, a great way to help people save up a deposit, which I must admit, in our part of the world in the northeast, isn't so much an issue where the house prices are much lower. But certainly in some of your more kind of leafy areas, looking at house prices, trying to save up that initial deposit is really, really hard. So having that help from the government to do so is really important. I think we're doing some really good things. And as I said earlier, I think our packaging is just what's a little bit lacking at the moment. We're not always good at selling it. And I think some of this comes down to social media as well. Sorry, I'm on a rant now. Because we know that Labour and the left are really good at social media because they are good at sound bites. They are good at your kind of click reactions. They are good at one line. I think one of the people that does this incredibly effectively, who is about as far politically opposed to me as I could possibly get, is Zara Sultana, who will tweet things that it's kind of one line saying capitalism's a disgrace, and it gets 50,000 likes and gosh knows how many retweets. Because it's quick and it's easy and people appreciate simple messages. And I think we're not always as good at that. So I think we do need to play them a little bit at their own game, make sure our messaging is completely top-notch. That would be it.
I think if you tweeted capitalism is a disgrace, you might also get quite a lot of retweets.
That'd be all my conservative cred gone.
I was going to say. But Jason, I think skills seems to be a really big thing here, and apprenticeships and opportunities. The Chancellor obviously yesterday extended the Kickstart scheme. Are those sorts of programmes the thing that we need to see more of? Do we need to see kind of extensions of that kind of youth offer? And is there more that the third sector and YMCA in particular is doing to sort of help support those things?
We very much would agree that there is much more demand for it. I mean, the fact is, for a lot of young people, university simply isn't the option for them, and there are better things that they can do for for their own skills and for their own lives. And I think there has definitely been this push to go to university, and it's absolutely right that that's been reversed. I mean, for me, it's always been kind of like youth organisation is exactly the same. We go, what's our youth offer? And we try and do the youth offer. And actually what we should do is reverse it and do the stuff that people say their aspirations, and then you put it together as what you've done for young people. And actually, because what young people are telling us is they don't want a youth package. What they want is the ability to do the apprenticeships, to be able to access good housing, to be safe in their communities. If you deliver on that, the rest then follows.
Great, thank you. And I'm very keen and conscious that there's probably quite a lot of questions in the room, so I want to make sure we get as many of them in as we can. So we should have a roving mic at the back. Bear with me one moment. Great, I think first hammer's down here if we can, and then I'll go to the back and then down to the front.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Luke. I am the membership lead for an organisation called Blue Beyond. Dehenna, you know all about us already. For those of you who don't, we're an organisation that seeks to increase possibility and exposure for Conservatives that live outside of the metropolitan cities. So I agree with a lot of what all of you have said. Dehenna, as you said, not really communicating what the good things that we are doing enough, that social media stuff. Jason, as you said, the things that young people are looking for, I think that we are the party of aspiration, we do communicate that. However, it really doesn't help when the government are taking political policy decisions that then do not communicate that at all. You obviously have the social care levy, where I think the BBC analysis showed that that young people were hit mainly by that. I saw in the news a couple of days ago that the government are thinking of lowering the graduate repayment threshold to £23,000. That's more money that's coming out of my pocket. What the genuine situation seems to be then is, with the party of aspiration, we want to give you the opportunity, but then we want to take that reward away from young people. It still becomes hard for us. So I suppose what the main question is, why, when it comes to these kinds of decisions, does the Conservative Party want to make things harder for us rather than do something, make things slightly harder for older people?
Thanks very much. Whoever wants to jump in on this one first, but I was going to say...
I'll take the older people one.
There you are, Jay.
Well, I'll have a go. I'm afraid I can't comment on the tuition fees thing, because I don't know the detail on that. But on social care, part of the responsibility of government is taking tough decisions. For decades, we've ducked social care, and I think I'm pleased that we've tried to tackle it. Now, the sad fact of life is that we're all going to get old. You may start off young, but you'll end up the same as me. So it's about what model would be fair. And I know when I believe Gordon Brown first proposed the levy in the form that it is, it was considered a progressive tax because it targets business as well as individuals. But I do think that there are so whatever tax you have, it's going to seem unfair. This seems to be the least worst option. The alternative, which was mooted by the Labour Party, a wealth tax. I mean, they always say tax the rich and give to the poor. It's the kind of Robin Hood party, isn't it? But actually, it wouldn't generate enough funds for proper social care. And I personally think that a society is measured by how well it looks after people throughout their lives and at end of life. And so I think that it's a really important thing that we do it. So it's uncomfortable, but uncomfortable decisions have to be made. And but I would like to think that we do a lot of things that spend a lot of money in the youth area, which, I mean, I'm not going to say compensate, because it's something that's difficult and it would never be easy. I don't know if that's an acceptable answer, but that's as good as I've got.
Ben, Dehenna, do you want to add anything to that at all?
Well, for the first time, Ben and I were two of the 10 rebels on the social care levy, actually. So, Joe, we're outnumbering you for the first time. Ben, do you want to...
Oh, yeah, it's the world's worst time rebellion, wasn't it? Because it's literally the night before the reshuffle.
Focus a few minds, I think.
Indeed. I mean, it's... something needs to be done with health and social care. That much is obvious to anybody. The system is entirely broken. The economics of health and social care just don't work. I mean, if you've got a care home with less than 80 beds, you're not going to make any money. So it's the relationship between the private sector, the local government, and the NHS is broken. The referrals mean that people get lost in the system. So we do need to reform that, and I would delicately suggest that we probably need to reform that before we throw more money at it. And when it comes to raising taxes, I'm particularly uncomfortable with the idea of taxing jobs. I think we've spent an absolute fortune of our children and grandchildren's money keeping the show on the road through furlough, keeping those jobs in place so that our economy can bounce back. And the Chancellor has done an absolutely terrific job there. So let's not do anything that puts that at risk. But we are where we are, and therefore we do need to move on with this. I mean, to bring it to the generational question, we need to find a way of reframing the public perception of the welfare state. And because we have a system that was designed in the 1940s when people went to work in their teens and they worked right through till they were about 60, and then they got to about 63 and died. Nowadays, people go to university, they muck around in their 20s, they get a job in their mid-20s, they retire when they're about 50, and then we have the NHS, which keeps them alive till they're about 80, 85, and during that process they get a series of complicated and expensive illnesses that the state pays for. So looking at it from that perspective, we simply don't have a taxation and welfare system that functions in the same way that it used to. So we do need to step back and address the whole question of what is our taxation and welfare system for.
Sure.
I think, can I just quickly come in on the tuition fees point, the graduate sort of threshold repayment? I think it'd be a huge mistake actually to lower that threshold. Yeah, I mean, I think it varied anyway. When the tuition fees went up, the threshold went up, which was a really positive thing. But I think we need to get away from tuition fees and the repayments as we currently have them, because unfortunately it puts a huge burden on young people who do choose to go to university on their shoulders, because they feel, even though it's not debt in any way that you'd understand, it doesn't affect your credit rating or anything like that, they feel this burden of knowing they're in 50, 60, 70, 80 grand's worth of debt that they may never pay off, but they are still going to see that money coming out of their account every month. I think we need to get away from that, and I am never one usually to propose new taxes, but I think I'd prefer something like more of a graduate tax model, where you know that if you do earn more above a certain threshold, you're going to be paying that little bit for, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it might be, but at least you don't have that debt burden on your shoulders. And the marginal tax rate is huge at the moment. On young people in particular, if you're a graduate earning, I think, about £25,000, your marginal tax rate can be, I think, 62% on any additional earnings, which is nuts. The state should never be taking more than 50% of anyone's money, in my view. So I'm completely with you on that one, Luke. I think that's something that the government needs to think very, very carefully over, and I certainly wouldn't be supporting.
Great, thank you very much. I think our next question was up at the back there.
Thank you. Is it on?
Yeah.
I'm James, I'm an NHS doctor. My question was, what's the one flagship policy, because I think you're absolutely right, that's going to sell levelling up to young people and all people in one line?
Big question.
Just stall for a moment whilst you try and think of one snappy line to sell levelling up. Or perhaps also what may be useful to get sort of what your own definitions of what levelling up would be.
Well, can I go that there isn't one? So that one snappy line is, there is no soundbite for levelling up. So when I first became an MP, the need to go to the Treasury and say I want gazillions of pounds because that will level up my city, I felt a kind of duty. But I also felt a duty to listen, and this is, going back to the beginning of our conversation. I was new to Stoke-on-Trent, and I said, until I've had really big conversations with everybody that I represent, what my definition of levelling up is as an individual will not represent the definition of the people I represent, and therefore that conversation. So levelling up is a journey. I know that sounds corny, but literally, it is about engaging with the communities across the country that we represent, finding out what would make changes to their lives, and in a more concrete way, it's a combination of. I speak a lot about. It's not just shiny buildings. We do need shovel-ready projects. We do need, the one iconic building that everybody's got in their constituency that represents dilapidation and neglect to be converted, so that becomes a kind of beacon of aspiration. But we also need more youth workers. We need more facilities for people who want to start their own businesses. We need more higher paid jobs, and one thing that we haven't even mentioned, which I think is very much. So I'm a member of the Conservative Environment Network, and somebody said to me, "Oh, you're in a red wall seat. They're not interested in the environment because they're just interested in jobs." Now, I suspect that's also a slightly sort of generational thing of somebody not engaging with the young people in my patch, because I've never spoken to anybody that's not interested in the environment and in clean air and in net zero and the future. So levelling up is going to be slightly different in every part of the country, and the solutions are going to be slightly different. But the answer lies with you, not we just have to listen to you and then share and deliver.
Jason, I'd be interested to get your perspective on this. I know through the Building Britannia guide, which I know there's sort of copies around the room, there are obviously those 6 key points, which I know Ben touched on as well. From YMCA's perspective, what do you take levelling up to mean?
I suppose there's two answers from my perspective and YMCA's. Is that I think firstly we would agree with what Joe just said in terms of actually it will mean different things to different people. But actually, from most of the work that we've done with young people, what they're most interested in is the job market. It is the opportunities available to them in terms of work that they can access, or they are able to get the skilling up agenda for them. Because actually, if you think about the other aspirations they say, which is around being able to own their own home, or to have good health, or to feel financially secure, that all comes from their ability or how they work and how they skill up. And so that's not to say the others are not important, but that's the one that kind of comes to the fore a lot.
Yeah. And Ben, I see you nodding along a lot there at Jobs.
Yeah, very keen to come in here because I think there are no new ideas in politics, obviously, and really, I'm reminded of the Bill Clinton quip about George H.W. Bush. Now, George H.W. Bush was a managerial style of presidency. He was a one-term president for a reason. He was a bit dull. He was accused of not really selling the bigger picture, and this kept coming back every time he was going for re-election. It kept coming back, and he flippantly said, "Oh, the vision thing again," and of course, not having a vision is political suicide. And Clinton immediately replied, "It's the economy, stupid." And that's it. It's the economy, stupid. It is. So when we think about the economy, let's not think about it in terms of barrels of crude oil or freight going through with the Suez Canal or not. Let's not think about it in terms of GDP and investments on. Let's think about the economy in local terms, what it means for people. Have I got a job? Am I able to pay my bills? Is there money in my wallet? That's what the economy means. So when we think about it's the economy, stupid, it's can I afford to live? Am I comfortable? Is my community looked after? Are there jobs available in my community? Is the system working for me? So no, there's no one pithy soundbite, but if levelling up means anything, it's putting all of these pieces in place so that very hyper-local economies can begin to function. Because we know that around the country, there are areas in what we traditionally geographically term as red wall and the kind of more kind of cultural elements where that hasn't happened. So we need the investment in the local NHS, we need the investment in infrastructure, in jobs, we need some pump priming in local businesses in order to get private sector inward investment in. We need then further investment in skills so that people can be skilled up to do these new jobs, and that whole cycle goes round through education and more investment, and eventually, without increasing the footprint of the state, we've got this virtuous circle of economies, local economies, working for people. So it's about those people and the economies that they interact with.
Great, thanks, Ben. I think our next question was just down the front.
Hello, James Noble, Chairman of Brighton Kemp Town and currently a biophysicist at the UK's Dementia Research Institute. First of all, when I was doing my PhD, I was working with other scientists who didn't do a PhD, but did an apprenticeship. And they came from a much wider set of backgrounds and were some of the best scientists and probably better than anyone coming from Oxford and Cambridge who were also doing their PhDs at the time. So just to agree on you on that point. But why we're not winning Conservative voters, I think one of the reasons is because through your education, from school to university, you were surrounded by a highly unionised, very political workforce. And going into schools currently, going into staff rooms, it's like a communist society a lot of the time. Looking at universities, me being an out conservative in academia is not easy. It really isn't. And I'm a doctor, I'm a scientist, and I don't find it easy. So I wonder how our students suffer with that. And I think it takes them quite a lot of time to get over that shyness as well.
Dehenna, I know you're not shy about being a Conservative. I assume you are. Is that the problem? Is it that the role models, the people that the young people engage with outside of their own peers are tending to be not Conservative themselves?
I think there may be something to be said for that, but I think one of the bigger issues actually goes back even further, and that is that we don't frankly do proper citizenship education in schools to teach people about politics, to teach people the sort of critical thinking they need to actually come to their own judgments about what political views they have. A lot of young people, and I would have been one if I hadn't had this weird chain of events that led to me studying politics at A-level, which was a complete fluke, I should add. I would have been one of those people who got to 18 and an election happened and I was like, am I going to bother voting? I don't know what they stand for. And my family didn't particularly vote either. So I think citizenship is one of the real answers here, but proper citizenship education. And it's not just about the political side of things either. It's teaching kids the skills they need. It's teaching them about interest rates and mortgages, because I'm still none the wiser on some cases when it comes to that stuff. I haven't bought a house yet. I'm hoping to soon. But there are these real core life skills that people don't get in schools, but particularly that political education. But I think you're right. In academia, particularly for those kids that go to university, academia is very, very left-wing. At my own university, I went to Hull, which actually you would think Hull being a kind of socialist republic would be a really left-wing university, and actually I've got 2 other Hull students over there. It kind of wasn't, weirdly. There were a few academics there who were kind of really left, but we actually had a few conservative academics, including Professor Lord Norton, who was incredible and a real kind of role model to many of us, I think. But I think it is really difficult. I have friends who went to other universities and had a really, really hard time. They'd say they were conservatives and they'd get kind of light-hearted abuse. It's not light-hearted, it's abuse. It's, the sort of ribbing that people get for being a Tory. And it's exactly the reason I'm wearing this thing today, because I'm just sick of being slated for being a Conservative. I am proud. I'm proud we're trying to make people's lives better. I'm proud of the work we're doing. I'm proud that we believe in personal responsibility and freedom and low taxation. Why shouldn't I wear it? And anyway, as Angela Rayner said, scum, it is a jovial term that we Northerners use to describe each other. But no. But I think you're right. There is definitely a problem in academia. In schools, less so, because I think less people have that political exposure in schools, but certainly at universities, I think it's a massive issue. And we do have this freedom of speech bill going through at the moment, specifically for universities, so that people that some of these left-wing organisations don't like can't be no platform purely for having views that they don't agree with, which I think is a really positive step actually in trying to address this, but we can't kind of click our fingers and make it happen overnight, unfortunately.
I think just to pick up on that point around citizenship and skills and the way that young people are equipped for the future, and giving them a stake in politics and how life works. Alex, I'd be really interested to get your perspective on this. Do you think that's what is lacking generally, even not from a Conservative perspective, but just that young people sort of look at the world and it's all sort of grown up things that they don't really get taught about?
Absolutely massively. So I'm a youth worker. I work in Youth Voice, like that's what I do. And one of the big roles that we play in working with our young people is encourage them to question, to look, to research, to think about what is your opinion and where does that sit, and not necessarily say this is where you need to go, but just to encourage that process. And not enough young people are able to do that. So many young people come out and go, politics is not for me. Like I'm not interested in politics, but actually every single young person that I speak to is very interested in politics. They're just not sure about party politics, but actually they're very passionate about where they live, individual issue-based things, and actually to be able to influence them, then you need to look at, and so where do I channel that and where does that go? So I think I'm always going to come back round to like the investment in youth services, but for me that is what youth services do. They provide a safe space for young people to be able to develop, to question, to have them discussions that they can't necessarily have with other people because they get the backlash, or it's not appropriate to speak to that person. I can't speak to so-and-so about that because that's their belief. Well, actually, in youth services, we create that safe space for young people. And I think he's left now, but I would come back to the guy's question about like the one thing. I'm going to be that person. It wouldn't be me if I didn't say it, but I think the one thing that can really make a difference is to get the Youth Investment Fund over the line. Like, we need investment in young people, and that's what we need to do. So massively, I think that is where we need to be targeting. Not the only focus, lots of things are important. But if young people are not, before they get to 18, if they're not in a place to be able to have the skills, to ask them questions, to look at getting a job, to be in that stable place, like all of them other things don't matter. We need to put them foundations in first. So that's where I think we should go.
And I think that investment point is one that I want to come back on, but I'm conscious of getting some more questions in. I think there was one down over this side here. And then I'll come work across the room from there.
Hi, George Braid, Bishop Auckland Conservatives. I think if I could put our message in one simple sentence, it's living life by your own terms and we will give you the power to do it.
Yeah.
That's what we want to inspire in young people. And the thing is, you can do all you want by putting messages on social media. It doesn't often break through because it's exactly as you say, Alex. People are like disengaging from politics. So they say it's political. They go, actually, no, that's not for me. But what we've noticed in Bishop Auckland, where we've had recent electoral success, is going out and actually meeting the people, showing them what a Conservative is, showing them, look, we're not just robots in Parliament. We can actually speak to you. We can have a bit of banter with you. There's a reason Nigel Farage is so popular. He goes to the pub and has pints with people. That's what it is. And I would issue that challenge to all members of Parliament for our party. Can you envision yourself sitting down in a pub with someone that you represent in your community and having a good conversation about what's their story, where are you from, what can I do for you? And I bet you, outside of party political messaging, if you tell someone that, they'll go, do you know what, really? I can do that? They'll say, yeah, and I'll help you do it. I think that's how we get through as a party, and I would like to hear your thoughts on this, how about what more you guys can do to get out in your communities and show them firsthand our message.
Ben, do you want to come in on this one first?
Very quickly, a challenge accepted. See you in the spoons.
I noticed you've chosen the cheapest one for taxpayer efficiency. So
yeah, it's my round in the spoons. Yeah.
But I think taking that and maybe sort of putting this to a wider point to the panel, because I think there's two different issues that throws up, and part of it, I think, Dehenna, to your point around people putting themselves out there, do you think that the young Conservatives struggle to be vocal about the fact they're Conservative because their peers on social media are more likely to attack them, abuse them for it? And so it is generally people, when they get a bit older, they get a bit more sure in their views, they get a bit more confident with their views, that they are then free to express them in that way. And sort of the second part of the question, and if you don't mind me sort of paraphrasing this slightly, but in terms of that kind of sit down in the pub, is that thing a little bit done, and does it risk being seen as disingenuous, even if it has all the best intentions?
So on the second half of the question first, this is exactly what I did during the general election, actually. I ran a series of things called pub conversations, where I would literally rock up at a pub, we'd advertise it on social, we'd get the pub to put things out on their social, turn up for a couple of hours, I'd sit there, usually with a pint of dark fruits, I'd sip it slowly, don't worry, and get people to come along and just chat to me about whatever it was they wanted to talk to. And some of the conversations were tricky, some of them were a bit uncomfortable, some people weren't particularly pro-conservative, but at least they recognised that I was sitting there willing to have a conversation with them, and we never had a single bit of trouble. A single one, and George, you were with me at a lot of them. I think we must have done about 15 across the course of the kind of 5-6 week election period. We never had trouble. We had people critiquing my views, of course, and we had good debates and a good bit of banter, but people really appreciated the fact that someone who wanted to represent them was actually out there in the community talking to them, and I don't think you can ever really overstate that. And actually, now that they're properly reopened, we do need to get some more in the diary, so Ellie, over there, get it sorted. But to go to the point about kind of young Conservatives being willing to be kind of openly conservative, I don't think it's just a young people issue, actually. I mean, we saw it, particularly in the 2015 general election, where given, we just followed this kind of period of hung parliament, then coalition, the Conservatives weren't expected to actually win a majority. And as was reported by so many pollsters, the reason that we did was because of these so-called silent Conservatives, people who would go into the voting booth and put a cross next to the Conservative tree, but wouldn't tell their mates at work. They wouldn't tell their mates in the pub that they'd voted Conservative. They probably wouldn't mention it at all, but they might fib instead, and they certainly wouldn't tell the pollsters when they came knocking on their doors or ringing them up. So I think this is a massive issue, but I think it's changing, and I think the 2019 election is hopefully going to really help change that. We had people whose, parents, grandparents, generations were Labour, and they said, in 2017 they were saying, well, my granddad had spin in his grave if they ever thought I'd vote Conservative. In 2019, they were literally walking up to me on the street like, we're going to vote for you because Boris is doing a great job, and Brexit and whatever the other factors were. People were really proud to share the fact that they were coming across to the Conservatives. And I think that is actually starting to be manifested a little bit on social media now. I've noticed there's kind of more kickback by people who are a bit more right-wing minded to actually be vocal about their views and to share it and to challenge some of these lefties a little bit as well. Because often the attacks we get aren't based on any kind of fact at all. They're based on pure fiction. You challenge them with facts and they really struggle to come back. And then they block you, so it makes it easy. You don't have to deal with them anymore. I think it's certainly tricky for younger people in particular because social media is so kind of left-leaning, and social media, for young people, myself included, is so much part of my life. I've sort of used it since I was a kid. Started with Bebo, and it's never got any better. It's tricky for sure, but I think we need to all keep making sure we're fighting the good fight to prove that social media is not just a place for the left, and that for young people, they can be proud to be Conservatives. And hopefully, a few of us on the panel here can really help promote some of our young Conservatives to really get out there.
Thanks, Dehenna. I know you've got a dash off, so thank you very much to Dehenna for joining us. And I think our next question was just the second way down here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Williams, West London, Ealing. Actually, my question was actually about social media. Why Conservatives, the biggest weakness I can tell is lack of social media and being active, engaging. As a mum of 20 years old son, I can actually tell that his entire life is being spending on social media. The way he sees things, he read, he getting knowledge from, is always social media. And clearly, for me as a person, I try to report on many occasions in my Ealing, that we don't have anything like social media. So I did report it, I did fight back, like actually Dina mentioned, to my local party. We're going to engage more, we're going to do this. Still, several months later, nothing happened. Still nothing. So 11 years, we didn't win. And my question is, I wonder why.
Very interesting question, and I think this is one that I know the Conservative Party and various MPs, various campaigns go round and round on, is to the role that social media does play. And I know Dehenna sort of touched on this earlier around, is it just shouting into the void? Is it coming sort of into a space where everyone on social media is largely left-wing and it sort of doesn't really matter, and even when we have kind of the youth quake that Jeremy Corbyn had, it didn't actually translate into votes? Or is it actually a really powerful and important tool, and because it's where young people are kind of getting their source of information, is it something that we need to engage in? And Jay, do you want to?
Yeah, for me, it was uncomfortable, the fact that people would actually like to watch me eating and drinking and you know, sort of following my every move, because I quite frankly didn't think that I was that interesting or it was that important. But then, you know, I realised when I got something like 58,000 views on Twitter of me having my jab, my vaccination, that I mean, maybe they like to see me in pain, you know. I'm not sure, but certainly, you know, I use all social media platforms and YouTube videos and the like, and do a monthly report, because I think it's about. You know, I don't know how many people watch it, but I do know now that people recognise me when I go out. You know, we've had lockdown and it's been very difficult to engage in the way that I naturally would have liked. You know, we couldn't shake hands, we couldn't ask people. Going back to another question, it was interesting. I did a Q&A with I think they were year sevens in a local school, and they said you can ask your MP anything, and this young boy said, we've got real problems with litter in my area. What are you going to do about it? And I said, well, let's do a litter pick. And the teacher immediately said, you see, you asked your MP what they were going to do about litter, and you know, we're going to organise and we'll have a school litter pick, and the MP will come along, and you've had an immediate impact. And that, to me, is what, you know, the engagement that we should be having, that it's direct, and there's a sense of as MPs we're accessible and we can be asked anything and we can be challenged, and you know, if people are interested in, you know, what we eat and whether we've got pets or not, and you know, well, fair enough, if that makes us more accessible.
I think it's more about that young people think that we're all the same. That's the matter.
Yeah. Well, they know I'm not now.
But I think there's another interesting side to the social media question as well, and one that I'd like to hear your thoughts on, Jason. I know one of the key things in your kind of building Britannia piece, building Young Britannia piece, is thinking about mental health for young people, and there's that sort of that flip side to social media, where it can bring communities together, and as Joe said, you know, over the past 2 years, that's been more important than ever. But there's that sort of that darker side to social media as well. And do you think that's, again, it's just a similar question, but probably a different response in terms of social media's positives versus negatives, and the role that it has to play for the mental health of young people?
I think the first thing I'd say is that we keep using the term social media, but you need to kind of break it down a bit more than that. In that, most young people aren't on Twitter anymore. The moment your mum joins Twitter, you leave, and they go on to something else. And actually, I think most political parties, I think most adults really, have been woeful in keeping up with what happens in terms of social media, and that includes parents in terms of trying to protect their children online. So I think we need to understand it a bit more. I think in terms of when we're all on Twitter taking pictures of having jabs and breakfast, which is the same as you, why? They're actually all on Instagram and Snapchat because Twitter and Facebook is what your mum's on. So. So there's that. But for us, certainly it's one of the things that has come through very strongly in terms of the abuse. And someone like Dehenna, who's a very strong character as an MP, is prepared to take on. There are hundreds for every one who literally cannot take that abuse. There's that pile-on mentality that goes on when someone disagrees. And no wonder we have people, what they call it, the shy Tory syndrome, which is where you will not express a view that is seen as conservative because you'll literally have 50 people who say really disgusting things online. And one of the campaigns we did quite recently was around body image, and about it's both genders, but particularly young females who have been attacked online for how they look, and the impact that has on their own self-esteem, their mental health, has been quite devastating, and parents don't know it's going on, they don't know how to deal with it, and so for me, that if that's not resolved, I think eventually that will end up going for government regulation. It will have to.
Sure. I think our next question was just in the middle of that.
Hi there. Just wondering if we can, just wondering if we can talk about tax. I'm Andrew Dixon, chairman of Fairer Share, which is a system to reform council tax and make it less regressive. And also my day job is a venture capitalist. And it seems the tax system is incredibly regressive for younger generations. I know that my staff, for example, pay a higher tax rate than I do because I get capital gains, they have to pay income. I know that their council tax bills are higher than mine as a percentage of the property value. Just wondering what the panel's thoughts are in terms of how we might look at addressing this, because it does seem slightly unfair for younger generations.
Ben is our rebel in chief.
I think, well, firstly, if it was easy, we'd have done it by now. But the problem with our taxation system is that it's kind of evolved over the course of several centuries, and every time we've tweaked it, we've kind of made it a bit worse. And we've found new things to tax. We're not currently funding a war with the French, but that was why we initially got income tax up and running. And so, aside from those noble ideals, we do need to look back at what we want the taxation system to actually do. Do we want it to bluntly raise revenue for the exchequer, or do we want to use it for more discrete purposes, to incentivise behaviours that we see as politically good? That's possibly a moral question to a completely amoral instrument, taxation. Ultimately, we're never going to reform one section of tax. So the Fairer Share campaign is a very good and detailed campaign. But if we are looking at replacing a property tax with something else, if we replace it with something else, it will just be a like-for-like swap. So we need to then look at the broader system of how revenue is raised, the distribution between local and national taxation, the role of business rates in the overall take and the distribution of business rates, and what we want that to achieve, how that layers into the levelling up agenda, for example. Do we use the taxation system to incentivise economic growth, like special economic zones they do in the Middle East and China? But ultimately, you can't tinker with it, because it's so complex and so almost broken that any more tinkering is going to break it some more. So yeah, it's every treasury, every chancellor is going to tell you now is not the time. We've borrowed to the hilt. We've got we can't increase the size of the state. We've got far too much debt repayment. We've got capital is cheap at the moment in terms of the borrowing, but we don't want to borrow anymore. There's never a good time. There's never a Conservative chancellor that will say, "Hey guys, actually now's the time for some radical reform because we've got loads of money. Knock yourselves out." So there's no simple answer to the question. We are kind of where we are with it. I would be opposed to tinkering. I'm philosophically opposed to raising taxes, as I've staked a couple of years in the wilderness for my career on. But yeah, it needs radical reform, but I've no idea when and how.
Great, thank you very much. We are sadly running out of time, so I just want to thank all of you for attending this evening, for everyone who's watching at home, to YMCA for partnering with us on this event. To all of our panellists, Jason, Joe, Dehenna, Alex and Ben, thank you all very much. Do stick around. I think there's probably a little bit of warm white wine at the back for anyone to have a conversation afterwards. But thank you all, and we hope to see you at an event soon.